this isn't a story about guns. It's about evolution. It's about how a handful of engineers, soldiers, and designers changed the way human beings kill each other forever. The weapons you're about to discover didn't just shift the balance of power in a few conflicts. They rewired the DNA of modern warfare, turned peasant armies into superpowers, and put the capacity for devastating violence into the hands of millions across every continent on Earth. Before you settle in, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. Phone away, distractions silenced. Tonight, we examine the genesis of the modern battle rifle, a transformation so profound that its echoes still reverberate through every battlefield on the planet. Let's begin. In the beginning, war was intimate. Our story begins not in 1942, not in the Cold War laboratories of the Soviet Union or American proving grounds, but centuries earlier, in the trenches of the First World War. The fields of Flanders and the Somme were proving grounds for a brutal truth. The rifles soldiers carried were relics of another age. The standard infantry weapons of 1914, bolt-action rifles like the British Lee Enfield and the German Mauser, were accurate, powerful, and utterly inadequate for the close-quarters chaos of trench warfare. Picture the scene. November 1916, the Western Front. A German soldier crouches in a muddy trench, his Dewey 98 rifle gripped in frozen hands. It fires the 7.92x57 Mauser cartridge, a full-powered round capable of killing at 1,000 meters. But here, in this hellscape of barbed wire and poison gas, the enemy is 30 meters away, sometimes less. The rifle is too long, too heavy, too slow. Between each shot, he must work the bolt, ejecting the spent cartridge and chambering a new one. In those precious seconds, men die. This problem haunted military planners for decades. The first chapter of this story takes us to the dawn of the 1940s, as Nazi Germany found itself engaged in the most brutal conflict in human history. A designer named Hugo Schmeisser, born in 1884 in Jena, Thuringia, came from a dynasty of weapons makers. His father, Louis Schmeisser, had helped design the Drace pistol. Hugo himself had spent decades developing submachine guns. But by 1940, he was working on something revolutionary. The German military faced a tactical paradox. Their standard rifle, the Kar-98K, was excellent for trained marksmen engaging targets at distance. Their MP-40 submachine gun was devastating in close quarters, but there was nothing effective in between. Schmeisser, along with engineers at the Henel firm, began developing a weapon around a radical new cartridge, the 7.92x33 Mkurs, which means short in German. This intermediate cartridge delivered less recoil than full-powered rifle ammunition, but remained lethal at typical combat ranges of 300 meters. By 1942, prototypes emerged. The weapon was initially designated the Maskenenkarabiner 42, or MKB-42. It was compact, selective fire, meaning it could shoot semi-automatic or fully automatic and fed from a 30-round detachable magazine. Adolf Hitler initially opposed the project, believing full-powered rifles were essential, but field reports from the Eastern Front told a different story. Soldiers loved it. By 1943, the weapon was secretly produced under the designation MP-43, masquerading as a submachine gun to avoid Hitler's scrutiny. Then, in 1944, after Hitler finally witnessed the weapon's effectiveness, he gave his approval and personally renamed it the Sturmgewehr 44, the Assault Rifle 44. The St. G44 became the world's first widely produced assault rifle, a weapon that combined the firepower of a machine gun with the portability of a carbine. Approximately 425,000 were manufactured before the war's end. It was too little, too late to save the Third Reich, but its impact would be felt for generations. But then, something changed. The second chapter reveals the weapon that would define the modern era. In October 1941, a Soviet tank commander named Mikhail Kalashnikov was struck by a German shell during the Battle of Bryansk. He was 22 years old, the 17th of 19 children born to a peasant family in southern Russia. As he lay wounded in a hospital bed until April 1942, he listened to his fellow soldiers complain about their weapons. The Soviet submachine guns were crude. Their rifles were heavy and cumbersome. Kalashnikov was a natural tinkerer, a mechanic who understood machinery intuitively. During his long recovery, he began sketching. He imagined a rifle that was simple, reliable, and effective, a weapon that could be manufactured by a nation with limited industrial capacity, that could function in mud, snow, and sand, that even an illiterate conscript could operate. After his discharge, Kalashnikov worked obsessively. By 1946, he had refined his design. In 1947, he presented it for official military trials. On November 13, 1947, the design was completed. In 1949, the Soviet Army officially adopted the Avtomat Kalashnikova Model 1947, the AK-47. The name would become synonymous with revolution, insurgency, and warfare itself. The AK-47 fired the 7.62x39 cartridge, an intermediate round inspired by the German Kurz concept. It featured a simple gas-operated mechanism with a rotating bolt. Crucially, it had generous tolerances in its manufacturing, which meant dirt and debris wouldn't jam the action. It could be dropped in a river, buried in sand, frozen in Arctic conditions, and still fire. It was cheap to produce, easy to maintain, and devastatingly effective. But this progress carried a shadow. The West, meanwhile, was pursuing its own path. In the United States, an engineer named Eugene Stoner was working at Armor Light Inc., a small California-based company. In 1956, Stoner designed the AR-10, a battle rifle firing the 7.62x51 NATO round. The rifle was innovative, using lightweight aluminum and fiberglass instead of traditional wood and steel. But the US military was not interested. They had just adopted the M14 rifle. The M14, introduced in 1959, was a traditional battle rifle firing the powerful 7.62 NATO cartridge. It was accurate and hard-hitting, but it was also heavy and difficult to control in automatic fire. Stoner, undeterred, scaled down his design. By 1957, he had created the AR-15, chambered in a small, high-velocity cartridge, the 5.56x45. The rifle was a marvel of engineering, light, accurate, and controllable. Meanwhile, in Europe, the Belgians introduced the FN-FAL, the Fusil Automatique Léger, or light automatic rifle. Designed by Dieudonné Save and Ernest Vervier, the FAL fired the 7.62x51 NATO round and became the standard battle rifle for many NATO countries. It earned the nickname the right arm of the free world. By the 1960s, it had been adopted by more than 90 countries, from Britain to Australia to Argentina. However, this progress carried a shadow. During the Cold War, these weapons didn't just arm soldiers, they fueled proxy wars. In Vietnam, Afghanistan, Africa, and Latin America, the AK-47 and the M16 became symbols of competing ideologies. What happened next would shock the world. The third chapter unveils the crisis and consequences. In 1965, as the United States escalated its involvement in Vietnam, the M14 proved disastrous in jungle warfare. It was too heavy for smaller South Vietnamese soldiers and too cumbersome for the close-range firefights common in dense vegetation. Defense Secretary Robert McNamara ordered a rapid replacement. The AR-15, now redesignated as the M16, was rushed into service. But the transition was catastrophic. Eugene Stoner had designed the AR-15 to use a specific gunpowder, IMR 4475 stick powder. The military, however, substituted WC-846 ball powder, which burned hotter and dirtier. Additionally, soldiers were told the rifle was self-cleaning and didn't need maintenance. Cleaning kits weren't even issued. The result was carnage. In 1967, during battles in the Ia Drang Valley and later during the Siege of Khe Sanh, M16 rifles jammed constantly. Soldiers were found dead next to disassembled weapons they'd been desperately trying to clear. One Marine wrote home, "Our M16s aren't worth much. If there's dust in them, they will jam. Out of 40 rounds I've fired, my rifle jammed about 10 times. I pack as many grenades as I can plus bayonet and K-bar knife." Congressional hearings in 1967 uncovered evidence of negligence by both the Army and the manufacturer, Colt. How did this happen? Why didn't anyone stop it? The bureaucratic horror was compounded by institutional arrogance. The rifle was eventually fixed, chrome-plated chambers, improved magazines, cleaning kits issued. But the damage to its reputation lingered for years. Meanwhile, the AK-47 was proliferating across the globe. The Soviet Union exported the rifle to allied nations and licensed its production in China, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East. By some estimates, between 70 and 100 million AK pattern rifles have been produced since 1949. The weapon became a symbol of revolution. It appeared on the flag of Mozambique. It was wielded by the Viet Cong, the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, and liberation movements from Angola to Nicaragua. In Afghanistan during the 1980s, the Soviet-Afghan War became a testing ground for both the AK-47 and Western-supplied weapons. The United States, through Operation Cyclone, funneled millions of dollars worth of arms to Afghan Mujahideen fighters resisting the Soviet invasion. Many of these fighters used AK-47s, ironically supplied by the Chinese or captured from Soviet forces. The war demonstrated the rifle's durability and effectiveness in harsh mountain terrain. The FN-FAL saw extensive service too. British forces used it during the Falklands War in 1982, where it proved effective in long-range engagements across the windswept islands. In Africa, the FAL was used in conflicts from Rhodesia to South Africa. Yet by the 1980s, most NATO nations were transitioning to smaller caliber weapons like the American or the Belgian FN Minimi. As we approach the modern age, the fourth chapter takes us through the transformation of warfare itself. By the 1990s, the era of the traditional battle rifle had passed. The Cold War ended, but its weapons endured. The AK-47 and its variants continue to dominate conflicts worldwide. In the Balkans, in Iraq, in Syria, and across sub-Saharan Africa, the Kalashnikov remained the weapon of choice for both state armies and insurgent forces. The rifle's cultural impact became immense. It appeared in films like Lord of War where Nicolas Cage's character called it the world's most popular gun. Musicians referenced it in hip-hop lyrics. Video games like Call of Duty and Counter-Strike immortalized its distinctive silhouette. The AK-47 transcended its origins to become an icon of resistance, rebellion, and violence itself. In the United States, the AR-15 took a different trajectory. After Colt's patents expired in the 1970s, civilian semi-automatic versions flooded the American market. By the 2010s, the AR-15 had become the most popular rifle in America, with millions in civilian hands. Its modular design allowed endless customization, but it also became the center of a fierce debate over gun rights and mass violence. Modern militaries continued innovating. The US adopted the M4 Carbine, a shortened version of the M16, as its primary infantry weapon. Special operations forces experimented with new calibers and platforms. In recent years, the US Army selected the XM7 rifle, chambered in 6.8 x51, as the M4's replacement, rekindling debates over caliber, capacity, and doctrine. Is a more powerful round necessary for modern combat, or does it sacrifice the volume of fire that suppression requires? Russia modernized the AK platform with the AK-74, firing a smaller 5.45 x 39 cartridge, and later the AK-12, featuring improved ergonomics and modularity. China, meanwhile, developed its own rifles, like the QBZ-95 bullpup design. But the fundamental concept born in the 1940s, a select-fire rifle using an intermediate cartridge, remained dominant. Today, we still live with the consequences of decisions made 80 years ago. The genesis of the modern battle rifle fundamentally altered human conflict. These weapons democratized warfare, making it possible for irregular forces to challenge conventional armies. They enabled insurgencies, revolutions, and proxy wars that continue to this time. Consider the philosophical implications. Hugo Schmeisser's St. G44 introduced a concept so effective that it was copied, adapted, and refined by every major military power. Mikhail Kalashnikov, who died in 2013 at the age of 94, expressed late-life regret over the suffering his creation had caused, writing a letter to the head of the Russian Orthodox Church asking if he was morally responsible for the deaths. He never received a satisfying answer. Eugene Stoner, who passed away in 1997, saw his design both vilified and celebrated. The M16 platform, despite its troubled birth, became one of the most successful and enduring weapons systems in history, serving for over 60 years. Its civilian variants sparked debates that continue to divide nations. The story of the battle rifle is not simply a tale of engineering triumph. It is a mirror reflecting humanity's capacity for innovation and destruction. These weapons didn't just change battlefields, they changed societies. They influenced geopolitics, shaped cultures, and remain embedded in our collective consciousness. The rifles born from the crucible of World War II, the St. G44, the AK-47, the FN-FAL, the M16, were products of their time, designed to solve specific tactical problems. But they unleashed forces that transcended their original purpose. They became instruments of ideology, symbols of power, and agents of change. The story continues. Even now, engineers and designers are developing the next generation of infantry weapons, but they stand on the shoulders of Schmeisser, Kalashnikov, and Stoner. The Genesis War, the war that birthed the modern battle rifle, never truly ended. Its legacy lives on in every conflict, every revolution, every act of violence committed with these descendants of those first revolutionary designs. We carry their burden still.